Everyone to the Wednesday, October 25th special meeting of the Pine Bluffs Town Council. Will everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item is the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second or third.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the public hearing for the current liquor license applications. Do we have any public comments? Public comments? I don't know if I have to ask 3 times on this. but-
Yeah.
Public comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
On to new business. Item number 1 is the review and approval of liquor license for this year. Retail license for Naughty Pine Saloon, Pine Bowl, and Transwest Development. Bar and grill license for Curry's and Sadie's Cafe. A restaurant license for Estella's LLC, and a satellite distilling license for MC PBD LLC.
I move to approve the submitted liquor license applications.
I will second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the liquor license. Any discussion? All right, I believe we have to have a roll call vote. Jen?
Aye.
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 Motion carries for the approval of the liquor license. Item number 2 on the new business is the stormwater presentation and discussion, and I will turn it over to you.
I did not think this would be so quick, so thank you, Councilman.
We're waiting for the call to connect. Hello?
Hi, this is Marcus Kroll.
Hi, Marcus. You're on speaker here, and we're just starting the presentation.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Marcus Kroll with HDR. Pleased to be here tonight. Sorry I could not be there in person. So,
Sorry about that.
would you like any other introductions, Mayor, or should we just jump in here?
Well, we haven't had an introduction yet.
Oh, my apologies. I work very closely with Marcus Kroll. My name is Brandon Noble. I am one of HDR's engineers in the Cheyenne office. I have been largely responsible for the development of the model for this particular stormwater master plan.
We have maybe not the best system. Are you able to hear him?
Yeah, I was able to hear Brandon fine, and he's going to give much of the presentation tonight, so hopefully the council and everyone can hear me. Again, my name is Marcus Kroll with HDR Engineering. I'm project manager for your stormwater master plan project, and Again, apologies, could not be there with you all tonight. I'm just gonna give an introduction here and an overview of the process and hand it back over to Brandon to really tell you the results.
Okay, can you hold up for just 1 second while we clear up some technical difficulties on our end here? I'll let you know.
Yes, sir, no problem.
Thanks.
It's a very cheerful TV.
There we go, that's what we want. Maybe. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, Marcus, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, well, you have to bear with me because I cannot see the slide deck. Hopefully we're kind of to the introductions. And again, I'll just briefly touch on the process here. I know we had a slide kind of just schematically showing you the overall approach to your master plan. And clearly we wanted to work closely with the town and your staff to really begin with this information gathering phase, understanding and defining your system. And so that's what we did. And an acronym that will be thrown out is the CPR assessment. And just to quickly define that, I mean, we focused our assessment when looking at existing infrastructure around the condition, performance, and reliability of those assets. So when we look at maybe a culvert or some type of drain, we at HDR helped assign the condition rating, worked with your team on performance and reliability. And so we went through that process, developed the model. Brandon's going to speak to that here. Use the model as a tool to simulate and not only your existing conditions, and again, baseline and define where you're at now, but to look into the future and ultimately develop CIP. And so this draft document, and we're putting the finishing touches on it right now. That'll be delivered to Kim and staff here this week. This is a rollout and presentation of those results. And just to set the stage, please feel free to hop in at any time with any questions. But with that, I think I'm just going to hand it over to Brandon and kind of walk you through the rest of the process. I will stay on the line here. If there's any other questions, I can hop in at any other time.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Marcus. And again, thank you for having us here. To kind of kick this off, I'll try to keep this fairly brief. The model itself is fairly easy to turn into an academic exercise, so there's a lot of intricacy and nuance. So if you want me to step on the gas a little bit, let me know. If you want me to dial it back, that's fine too. So kind of get started. The town of Pine Bluffs is a fairly interesting environment just from a topographic standpoint. You know, you're extremely varied in the south with the bluffs in the region, and then moving off towards the north, it's fairly flat. So one of the things that we ended up taking a look at initially was to try and go through and develop, 3 main zones, and these zones will be applicable as we get into the development of projects and how they're laid out. Now, from our perspective, and taking again a look at this from a topographic layout, is the first zone would be the upland bluffs. And again, these names are subject to change, comment within the draft document. So if there's something you'd like to change, please feel free to let us know. The second zone, which is clearly bounded by I-25 and on the north, Highway 30, is the town of Pine Bluffs. This is where almost all of your residential, the highest density residential layout is going to be. And then the third zone is your North Wells area and the upcoming Prairie View subdivision that we have been assisting you with. So once we'd identified those areas, we took a look at kind of a desktop level review, went through the information that was available, went and looked at, what precipitation data we had to play with. And then the next step was to go and work with your personnel. We spent 2 days here in the snow and cold. It was really a good time, and I'm very grateful to both Andy and Lauren. They were extremely helpful. We went through and identified all of the stormwater infrastructure that we could find that was known. Over the course of this, we were able to identify some spots that had been previously unknown. So it was certainly an interesting exploration. As Marcus alluded to, within this, we took a look at the CPR assessment for each of these structures. Condition and performance condition was more or less how we perceived the condition to be. So, for instance, if you have a culvert with a lip, that would be on the inlet side that's been folded over by a truck or a tractor driving over it, we'd say it's probably gonna have a fairly poor condition. It's not going to function as it's supposed to. The performance was more of an anecdotal assessment. We took and talked with operators about areas within the town. Kind of asked, in high flow events, how does this perform? How do you perceive this? So some structures behave better than others. And then in terms of reliability, this one is a little tied in with performance, but again, is anecdotal. Talked with the operators. If they didn't have any issues with it, we consider this to be a fairly reliable asset. If they did have consistent issues with it and it did function, it was considered to be a fairly poorly reliable asset. So, to kind of give you a little bit of a breakdown here for the model itself, as I mentioned, we have the 3 zones that we've identified, Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3 to the north. And what you're seeing here on the screen and on your tablets as well, in the blue lines is the stormwater model itself. The model is composed of 4 primary components. There are some others with nuance there, but the most common ones are your nodes. So that's going to be your culvert inlets, your drop inlets, links, which would be connecting pipes between inlets and outlets. And within the links, there are links that define subsurface flow and overflow. So when we were establishing the model, we had to set up a way for the water to know that once it got to a certain point, it could flow over land. And this was how we defined a lot of the flow here, at least within the downtown area. But we will get to that. Other components include storage and outfalls. The storage, you'll note, is at least denoted in this graphic as the blue bathtub. This is kind of a helpful bit of information for us. We took a look at the current USGS LiDAR to define the topographic lay of the land. And within some of these basins, and you'll see this as we get in here a little further, specifically the one that comes to mind is north of Market Street and Highway 30. There's a point where you have surface flow that drains into the railroad right away. We modeled this as a storage basin. It does affect how the water reaches the northern parts of the town, so fairly important to model. So one of the other things that we need to consider, and this was largely fed by our field visit with Lauren and Andy, was known problem areas. Now, given that this is a brand new model, we needed something to calibrate it against. And unless you're extremely detailed and really curious about the depth of stormwater in a certain area, it's going to be hard to know that in the intersection of Main and First Street that we had 6.8 inches of water. So when we're calibrating and validating a model, we need to know where the problem areas occurred and see if that agrees in the model environment versus what's been seen in the physical environment. So just kind of to give you some of the images that we looked at. Here is the crossing at Market and Highway 30, which is slated to be redone with a wideout culvert. So when we look at existing conditions versus future conditions, we incorporated wideout's design into the model. So that's already accounted for, and we're looking at how flows are going to be managed there. Similarly, on the conditions side of things, and knowing that we have a fair amount of depth, we were able to take and go through. Our surveyors were in the field. They came and pulled sections on most every intersection that we had directed them to, specifically where there were inlets. So what we're able to do is, if we assume that in the worst case scenario, which worst case scenario granted would be above the curb, we can use the curb as a depth validator to say that, in an certain event, it's likely that it would fill up to this much, which it's about a foot and a half in some areas on this curb for certain events. And then we tie all this in, we use this to validate our model, and then the next step is to run the model. So one of the deliverables from this project will be the fully functioning model in an InfoSwim environment, so you'll be able to go through this at your whim and will to take a look at it and see what we've done here. But just to provide a little bit of perspective for this meeting, we went through and thematically mapped the existing network. Now, one thing to bear in mind before I get too deep into this Anywhere you see a big red circle indicates a node that has failed or has been surcharged to the point where there's overflow. So that's to say that if you have a 1 foot culvert and in our model, if that culvert's failed, the water depth is well above 1 foot above the culvert and it's pouring over into a surface flow condition. So when we take a look at the baseline model, here's just for the town. We haven't run any rain over it. That's the model network. The 2-year model is where things start to get interesting. We start to see failures in the area around Pine Bluff Sand and Gravel, and then over here towards the Shrine and some of the eastern roads. Some of this, at least here in the eastern portion of the model, was defined kind of based on our own interpretation. Since there's not any direct stormwater infrastructure over there, we had to figure out some way to establish the links. But when we go and look at the 5-year event, you start to see that there are more points across the model that are failing. Now, it's curious to note that some of these culverts and links are not necessarily owned nor operated by the town of Pine Bluffs, however they do affect you. So for instance, most of the points you're seeing here along I-80 are a YDOT culvert that would be maintained by them and would have to drain effectively. So, baseline through 5-year, we start to see some failures in the 5-year existing conditions model. And as we advance this, and we get into the larger flows, here you can actually see, if we look at the line weight in between each of the links, the thicker it is, the more flow is being conveyed through that point. And this will be something that will be further expressed in the master plan document itself, as to say, for an existing condition, 25-year storm, we're gonna be flowing, if memory serves, about 150 to 215 CFS down Market Street. It's a considerable volume of water. But when we look at the 25-year storm, you can see that most points across the system have started to fail. 50-year, kind of the same thing. The 100-year event is pretty much systemic failure. It's a massive event. And at that point where there's going to be issues no matter where you're at, like with the amount of water that's going to come off of this. So the one thing that we needed to take a look at then was, what was the design storm going to be for the master plan? Some of this is to inform our efforts for design, and some of this is to help inform the draft ordinance that was developed. So in looking at this, the one thing that's kind of curious to consider is compound probability. Now, compound probability, what I mean is, for a given year, if we look at the certain design storm, for instance, the 25-year storm, which we ended up electing to go with as our design event, we have about a 4% chance of a 25-year event occurring. Now, if we wait 10 years, that chance goes up to 32, almost 33%. So 1 in 3 chance of one event occurring within 10 years. So what this can kind of help us do is this will help us inform the priority in the selection of how we move forward with developing the CIP. So with our CIP, we took a look at the areas that would have the largest benefit and try to prioritize those with the consideration that we're designing for a 25-year storm and not looking at the higher events, given that the conveyance infrastructure would have been extremely large to convey the event appropriately. So, taking that into mind, when we took the existing model, the next step is to go through and develop scenarios to try and alleviate the problem that we'd see in certain areas. So, at least with this particular instance for downtown, and just so you're aware, with these links, you can see these that have kind of a trapezoid to them. Those are your overflow, like street flow links. Everything else that's more or less just a straight line is a subsurface flow link. What we see when we run the model in the 25-year storm is there's about 1 foot to 1.5 foot of water that ends up chasing up Blair to 3rd and then up Main. So the one thing that is really important to consider is from an EMS and critical services standpoint is we need to be able to make sure that in the event something like this occurs, we can make sure that they have access or are able to access most areas. Now, I'd be willing to bet you an ambulance could probably go through more than 1 foot of water, but for our purposes, the foot of water was about where we targeted for passage. So the goal being in our model, we wanted to go through and reduce all of our overland flows to less than 1 foot of water if possible, by adding additional infrastructure, by making sure drainage is better handled on the downstream end.
Are you saying this is currently what would happen on a 25-year flow?
That's correct. So, gone through that. So the first scenario that I took a look at, and there are many others that have been expressed in the master plan, but the first scenario that I took a look at was what would happen if we were to go through and modify the existing storm sewer, at least just for the downtown area. And the largest pipe that's currently provided in this storm sewer system, which you can see it extends from Elm to Market and then up here to the outfall, is a 36-inch pipe. The 36-inch pipe at any one point in time is capable of passing around 50 CFS. So the main goal here would be to take and upsize this as much as possible, try and get as much of that water off the streets into the storm sewer and out into towards the North Wells area. So what I did here is I took a look at, what would it take to get these depths in the street along Market, 3rd, and Blair, and even here in the larger events along Market to the further to the south. I ended up going through and sizing these up to about what would be a 6 foot by 6 foot box culvert equivalent. Granted, this is just purely a sizing exercise, and further design would need to be done in the event that you elect to go through this, just to make sure that we're optimizing a solution that's going to be able to clear utilities, but still adequately pass the volume of water that we need to pass. Within this, also, alongside the upsizing of the trunk and the branch lines in downtown, I looked at what it would take to get all the water under the railroad, under Highway 30, and it ends up requiring about 2 pipes. The reason I tried to stick to around 2 is that no one wants to see 10 or so horizontal bores going under a railroad. They seem to get kind of touchy about that. So what I looked at, in order to pass all the water from the downtown area, it's about 2 72-inch pipes worth of water that would be going under the railroad. So it's a fairly large endeavor to take an upsize to this. So kind of bearing that in mind, the next thought was to look at other solutions. So the next scenario that we looked at for the downtown was what would happen if we purely upsized all of the downstream drainage going to the north. So currently, and I apologize that this map does not show that, there is a drainage channel that leaves from this outfall node and goes around to the southeastern entrance of Pine Bluff Sand and Gravel and curves up towards Road 213. In this scenario, I took a look at providing a much larger drainage ditch and rerouted that instead of going around Pine Bluff Sand and Gravel to just go straight to the north, essentially, assuming here that excavation and easements are a lot cheaper than horizontal bores. So the other part that we need to consider here too is that this entire system is in a downstream control, and what I mean by that is that at the outfall point, there's more water bounded there than can get through the pipe. So until that drains, you're not gonna be able to take any more water from the uphill side of the pipe out. So by allowing it to have a larger drainage channel, it gives it some more area, it gives it a little bit more storage, and it helps attenuate that flow a little
So
bit.
you're saying this scenario is just what's on the north side of the tracks?
That's correct. Yep. And so the one thing to note here though is, kind of looking at our flows, at least for the overland flow, we're still in excess of our criteria. So there's gotta be another solution.
So can you just tell me on there, you have that direct line going across and then you have the one further to the east. There are culverts at both of those?
Yes, so these are culverts that have been installed beneath the UP line. There are 2 36-inchers and 3 48-inch culverts.
But currently the straight one you show is that's non-existent, right?
This line right here?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that is in existence. That's the 36.
so there are both of those already.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
And just the one thing we found, at least in the 25-year event, is that this line, which is the 36-inch line, is woefully undersized to get all the water off the street and out through there. So really working towards, trying to optimize the capacity that we have in our existing system, but we're still gonna have to take a look at something here in town. So, if we take a look at downtown scenario 3A, which is kind of a combination of the previous two scenarios, we look at expanding the in-town storm sewer and also doing the realigned expanded ditch to the north. We start to see much more promising results.
Even without new culverts under the railroad.
No, so this would actually require a enlarged culvert under the railroad.
Okay.
But there is, you're getting ahead of me.
Sorry.
No, so there is a solution where we do look at that. And so within this, you know, we can start to see that our in-stream flow, or in-road flows are lessened. We're heading towards the right direction of getting below that 1 foot threshold. And it's looking promising. So the final scenario, which would be combine all of these together, with the exception of upsizing the line that goes underneath Highway 30, and well, I guess this one would go under Highway 30, under the railroad, looks at enlarging the downtown storm sewer, enlarging and realigning the ditch going to the north, and placing an alternative drainage path, like the subsurface. I think in this scenario we looked at about 48-inch culvert, going along Highway 30 and terminating out here at some point to the east, likely near Pine. This opens up a couple different options that we can explore, whether that's using the ball field itself as a kind of a regulation basin, if you will, and then having that slowly drain out into the railroad right away. I imagine they'll probably be a little touchy about having a bunch of water going along the railroad, so there's some options we can take a look at there, but we'll get to kind of the administrative agreement side of that too, because since we're all living, working, and running trains and living in Pine Bluffs, there's gotta be some agreement that we can come to that will be mutually beneficial. So, from our perspective, this is probably the most effective solution. Sorry. Oh, you're good. Questions? All right. From our perspective, this is gonna be the more effective solution for, at least for the downtown area. It satisfies all the criteria of getting flow off the road to less than a foot, and it actually, with the addition of this alternative drainage line, we can accommodate a larger design event than a 25-year. So, it's a lot of change that would have to occur, but it would be effective for what we've seen. The next area that we took a look at, and this one is maybe not as critical, but still, given that there's residential access in the area, it's one that we felt had merit, and especially through discussions with the town, it seemed prudent to take a look at. This is the area that we've referred to as, at least for the slide, as Pine Bluffs East, encompassed mostly by the corner of 6th and Black to 4th and Walnut and along Butler out towards Highway 30. In between the two images, it's a little hard to tell the difference. There's a slight shade change, which is kind of a symbology thing. What we're recommending here is to go through and improve the drainage ditches and increase the number of culverts where practical. Where not practical, we'd suggest enlarging the culvert just to accommodate a little bit more flow to keep it moving out and away from the town. If we add additional capacity and make it easier for the water to move, it'll drain faster and get out of the town and stop causing as many issues. I know, Kim, you'd spoken that there might have been some issues with erosion that have occurred in this area.
Yes.
So we'd take a look at, you know, a full, you know, at least we're proposing it would be like, you'd place energy dampening, energy management, just to handle those larger flows. Since as you flow more water, it has to flow faster, and it's more erosion force. So just for the longevity and ease of maintenance of the system, it'd be recommendations similar to that. Looking towards the future, the one thing that has really been interesting to work through on this master plan is the development of the new subdivision here to the north of town. From my perspective, after having to go through and manually delineate sub-watersheds across town, this was awesome. It was like, because now we can define all of our drainage areas, we can tell the water exactly where we want it to go, and it's functionally managed. So the design of the new subdivision accommodates the placement of several culverts throughout the area, and a storage pond, which will function as a detention pond. And what I mean by that is the water will flow in, it'll surcharge, and while it's doing that, there's an outfall that's gonna be active, and it'll slowly drain over time. The key thing here, the detention pond becomes very applicable when you get to full build out. That's to say that you have every single lot has been purchased, houses have been built, parking lots have been built. There's more flow coming off in the future condition than there is in the current condition, since it's currently a field. We don't want to send more water out to Lodgepole Creek than we absolutely have to at one point in time. So just from a good engineering practice, we took a look at a design that would allow us to discharge at the same rate as it's currently running off from the existing condition. So, we did, however, need to take into account the flows that would potentially come from the town if we do enlarge the drainage infrastructure. The one thing that was nice about this being a greenfield development is we were able to size the storage pond to pretty much whatever we like. Taking into account the 25-year event versus designed to a 100-year event, the storage pond will act as a source of borrow, and it will also successfully mitigate flows coming off from the town and from the development. So, we have identified most of the future scenarios from our perspective, and this list is by no means all-encompassing. There will be about 10 more projects that are going to be included in our summary, but just for the council's information, in advance of the rollout of the master plan, these are the 6, and this may be slightly different than what you have on your slides there. I will send out an updated version after this, of course. Really, the first and foremost one, this is again all based on the logic that if we can alleviate the downstream choke points, we can increase the drainage coming off at a relatively lower cost. First one here being your Pine Bluff storm sewer outfall to Road 213. We take and broaden out the ditch, get a new drainage easement. The earthwork's fairly cheap. Within this, we do have one opportunity with the Pine Bluff sand and gravel lot, given that that is town owned, and again, this is subject to some speculation for the future on my part. We have the potential to maybe turn that into a stormwater regulation pond, and again, what I mean, this is similar to the detention pond in the North Wells. It would charge with the water that comes off of the town, and then slowly release into the North Wells, just making sure that we don't overwhelm our system downstream. The second project, which we'd see is kind of tied in with the North Wells development, it's not Grossman, the ranch.
Oh, gross.
Gross. Yeah. So there is currently a ditch that flows off towards the northeast, going from Frenchman Valley and the crossing at Road 213. From our model, we took and expanded that ditch as well, just to provide as much drainage capacity as possible. That ties into project number 3, which would see a larger crossing, potentially even a bridge, being put in place for the Road 213 crossing over the drainage channel. The fourth project is an attempt to avoid any major work to the downtown storm sewer system, just trying to prioritize the stuff that we can do early on, get it done, improve drainage, make sure we have a little bit more capacity before we do anything much more serious. And that's to take a look at that alternative surface drainage. That's the one I was talking about going along Highway 30 off towards Pine Street. So there's an alternate here wherein we could increase the size of that drainage pipe to accommodate a much larger event. So that's kind of ends up becoming more of a cost benefit discussion, whether we want to be able to send a larger event than a 50 or 100 or larger event than 25 years, so like a 50 or 100-year event through there. The fifth project that we'd see would be a rehabilitation of the existing downtown storm sewer. So this would be a fairly invasive project and fairly extensive in terms of what would be required. So there's potential to tie in a lot of your street rework, curb and gutter, drainage. This would be something that would have to be, this would be a much more involved engineered design to go through and do, but it's one that would provide measurable benefit to the town. Finally, which I would see as, one that could be done at just about any time would be the rework of the East Pine Bluffs area drainage system as well. So, that's not to say that there aren't some projects that can occur in the meantime. Based on the findings of our CPR assessment and the work that we've done in our GIS system, we do have a list of culverts and other drainage conveyances that could be worked on in the meantime at a very low cost, essentially self-performed by the town. So we have this list developed, that'll be included as part of the master plans to say that, for the culverts that are over by Sadie's Cafe that are in a fairly dilapidated state, the person could go in, jet vac out all the sediment, do some preventative operational maintenance just to get them in line. I know that, operators' time is fairly precious, so what this would allow you to do is just develop a smaller prioritization schedule to go through and pick and choose your targets as you have availability. So, the next thing that we feel would be valuable for the town to explore would be to develop some sort of an administrative agreement with both UP and YDOT. Doesn't have to be one overriding agreement with both entities, it could be separate agreements with one or the other. But really just to make sure that they understand that it's in their best interest to provide some assistance in terms of upkeep of drainage infrastructure. It's gonna impact them if it impacts you. Seeing as how both of their easements and their operations, well, at least for YDOT, bounds you on the south and on the north, at least for the town, it's going to be fairly prudent on their part to allow you to either perform maintenance or to have them be cooperative with you in performing that maintenance themselves. Similarly for the railroad, it's just a protection of a fairly crucial asset. And anytime that we can have both the town and the UP work together, we feel that it would probably be something that would be of benefit. Again, I fully recognize that that's a fair amount of bureaucratic headache that would be involved with getting these done, but regardless, they would provide some more benefit. And finally, within the model deliverable, we'll provide essentially here you can see the GIS-based maintenance schedule. This ties in with, some of the assistance we've been giving with converting the town's GIS over to a self-managed system. What we do is set this up with the CPR assessment so that, in the event that a culvert's clean, the operator can go through and reset the timer essentially on that asset, and then it just starts to build this operations and maintenance program, where at least for, and this is just your storm sewer, for instance, they clean the culverts over by Sadie's, in 2 years, it comes up with a reminder that says, hey, check the culverts, and it gives a little bit more continuity in your operator's ability should you have turnover. So, based on our assessment, that's effectively where we're at. These recommendations will all be further covered in the master plan document itself, but with that, I'll open up to any questions or comments that you all may have.
I have a comment, and I think you did an excellent job explaining it all, so thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I wouldn't mind you, maybe going back to the priority projects and further, none of the maps clearly show this, but can you maybe give me a further explanation of number 4 on ours. Yeah, the alternate drainage. What does that look like? Right, so let's go to this guy. All right, so again, sorry, the orange is kind of hard to see on the red. This is what happens when you let an engineer make maps. So, what you're seeing here is and this falls in line with the administrative agreement with the UP. Since, going back to the beginning and we take a look at like the storage basin that we have here, we'd look to maybe augment this a little bit if possible. Now what this would do is we could get in here, clean out this basin, there's some different design techniques we could use just for long-term maintenance. It's like low impact design. Make it just a vegetated basin. It works for the railroad. It'll work for stormwater detention. Now what that'll allow us to do is we can control the invert with this so that we can set essentially an inlet right here for our, what's called a 48-inch pipe. That 48-inch pipe would then be placed under the old crossing at Main, go by the elevators,
storage, then the elevators.
So it would go underground?
Yeah,
that whole
exactly.
way?
It would be
Okay.
an underground
That was
system.
essentially my question. Okay.
And then, like I said, there are a couple different options we could look at. We could look at terminating it into the railroad right away, or if we wanna be good neighbors, we can bring it under and into the ball fields and potentially look at turning the ball fields into some sort of, detention pond.
So, under the scenario where we're talking about whether or not, like, I'm not gonna guess, the UP's willingness to address their end of this, we have all those data points. Do we know how much water is held in the two main, like in this area over here? Do we know how much, like, if we fixed everything to that point,
Mhm.
do we know how much, like on a 25-year flood, how much water can be held before it either runs over them or runs over Highway 30?
Absolutely.
And how long does, I'm not putting you on the spot, roughly,
Sure.
if we didn't care about being neighbors, if that's our storage basin,
Mhm.
how much water can fit in there?
Not enough is the long and short of it. I can tell you from the model, this will be one of the outputs that comes from there is, because this is set up as a stage storage, it looks at the basin itself. So we know exactly how much can be held in there. And, you know, again, were we able to store enough water in there to mitigate everything that's coming out of the town? That'd be great. We could just call it a loss, let it slowly drain and say we're
Right.
good. But that was one of the drivers for us is, you know, eventually we get to a point where this surcharges, and if memory serves, we're looking at about 25 to 30 CFS worth of flooding that ends up coming, it ended up going this way, back over these links, just water flows downhill. So if we're able to augment this storage a little bit, augment the drainage going out of it, while not interfering with the UP culverts, we can have the system that'll behave a little bit better.
So in percentage, how much is it short of being able to hold it?
In terms of the 20, well, for this
In
guy,
terms of a 25-year?
oh, off the top of my head, I can't tell you an exact percentage. Just in terms of flow rate,
Just guess.
I'd say it's probably about 3 times undersized.
That's what I want.
We're talking the basin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm granted, I'm basing this off of just what I'm recalling from the ratios of surface flow in the existing to subsurface flow, which is like storm sewer flow versus street flow. And the street flow, at least in the 25-year event, is about 3 and change times larger than the flow that's going out through the storm sewer.
Have you looked at the topography there? Well, I'm sure you have, but unfortunately, we don't go clear to the right of way. So if we were to have to get clear over to our property going north, on the north side of the tracks, to straighten that out as opposed to going clear around our property.
Oh, sure, here.
Like, is that
They're
not practical? Well, either way, we would have to cross them for a small piece.
Just for a little bit. And again, I'd imagine this would be, I can't speak to the railroad's feelings on this particular matter, but I would imagine that since we're further out in the right of way, they're probably gonna be a little more agreeable to it. They're still gonna have to follow their procedures as far as having people on site to take a look at it. But granted, this alignment that you're currently seeing is just based on kind of my best guess, take a look at the topography and figuring out what the best way would be to try and limit the amount of earthwork that we'd have to do to get it there. Now, that said, dirt work's pretty cheap. We can kind of pick whichever alignment we really want within reason. There are gonna be some constraints, just given that that's incredibly flat as we move out to the north. So we wanna be able to maintain as much potential slope as possible to get it to the North Wells drainage area. Otherwise, we're gonna end up with a very large puddle.
Yep. Well, as you can see in your last picture there,
That's what we get now.
I mean, the first one and the last one in that area is obviously problematic, but the entire rest of the drainage on the north, wherever you show it here, but on the north, I'm not sure, there's this, I can't find it, but anyway, the big angle, it angles around the end of the circle on, I think it's on the
sure.
north scenario.
Here we go.
So, just clear at the bottom of that,
Mm-hmm.
I would say from that data point, wherever the point where it turns northeast, right there,
Mm-hmm.
if it makes it halfway down that angle, I'd be shocked.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I guess ask me, or tell me where I'm wrong about this. It seems to me that stormwater should be built backwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
We should be fixing, before we worry about fixing upstream, we should be, whatever's required there, that ditch should be cleaned, deepened,
Mm-hmm.
whatever's required to get the right flow from that, well, further down than that, but at least there, we should be getting that fixed, right?
Correct.
And working our way back.
Yep.
Before we make
Yeah,
that
we
worse.
agree, that's reflected in the master plan there, and probably, you know, when we'll see far in the weeds and some of these other projects here today, that's exactly where you want to start. And that is reflected in our master plan, CIP recommendations. And so the way your system is failing is in that exact downstream control, we call it, or a tailwater condition. So, you know, you're kind of steep across town, but then on the back end where it's, you know, draining towards the North Wells area is much flatter, of course, and that's where it gets choked up, and that failure has an impact upstream. And so, you know, if you address those issues downstream first, you're gonna see your best ROI. That is absolutely where we recommend to begin.
Well, I don't really wanna get in the weeds too far on this, but, other than to say on what's currently called North Beach, like, since you're engineering both parts of this project, is this, do you feel like the existing road placement allows for a big enough drainage ditch on the west side of the road to accommodate the flows we're talking about?
It's a great question. Brandon, where are we at? I believe you had identified that within the master plan doc, approximate dimensions for that ditch. You know, it had something larger than there, didn't it?
Yeah, no, we had definitely identified that, so that will be incorporated within the final set. The one advantage that leads us to is that since it is a little larger than the existing drainage ditches that we have designed, we can have effectively a little bit more fill to play with, which allows for some cost optimization in construction. So, yeah, we will incorporate.
I'm just wondering, my question is does the road, I know we have more right of way than road, but
Mhm.
does the road need to be moved over to accommodate bigger drainage ditch in that area?
Not necessarily, and that's one thing we will double check that before we get too hasty. And there are some modifications that we can make in terms of width and depth if need be. Kind of what you're seeing here is, you know, my kind of back of the napkin, this size will work sort of thing. And that's not to say that that's the only size that would work. So there are, like I said, there's variability within width and depth to that drainage channel that we can leverage as part of our design.
And so not holding you to this, but do you anticipate that it gets so flat in that area with all the downstream flow or upstream flow coming into it, that those ditches in the north Wells area or whatever is, that they're going to get pretty deep to accommodate the slope from that distance?
Obviously, we want to minimize depth. I mean, no one wants like a 15-foot ditch,
Right.
hypothetical, going off. We'll take a look at it, and where we can make engineering sense, we will do that. And that's where, at least within our recommendations, if we were to go through and have, you know, our entire wish list done, that wouldn't be an issue. But if we're gonna try and counter this on just surface drainage and expanding the drainage ditches themselves, then we may be looking at a little deeper ditch, so.
And in the final master plan document, for your proposed projects, will there be estimated costs for each of those projects?
Yes, there will. So the costs themselves are been done, and we're currently undergoing QC to what we're calling it's a, Marcus, feel free to chime in on this one. It's American Association of Civil Engineers Class 5 estimate. Now what that is that's the cost estimate you typically see from a 0 to 5% worth of project design level. It's very high level. It incorporates a fairly large amount of slack on both the high end and the low end, just to cover a broad range. So what you'll get with the CIP and the prioritization list is the project's location, how much they're gonna cost, and at least our proposed implementation period within like 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and then 10 to 20 years. So.
And Mayor and Council, I bring this up mostly because we have, as with our community master plan, we have to have the master plan before we can go out and try to apply for other grants to actually make the repairs. And currently there is a BRIC grant application that is open now until January, and we will take we'll review our project list, and we will be applying for some additional funds. Generally, that requires a 25% match from the town, so we're gonna have to look at, how much of a 25% match can we, reasonably fit into our budget. And then we will apply for a grant to at least get going on some of these projects right away.
And you didn't include those costs because you didn't want to get beat up tonight, or?
No, not because of that specific reason. So.
Well, I don't have anything else, but does everybody else?
Neither.
Thank you.
Okay, hey, Ben.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, thank you all. Have a good night. Bye now.
Great. I guess moving on to item number 3, review and approve EMS retirement plan request. Would you like to represent that, or you want Pat to represent that? Didn't really come from Pat, so.
Sure, I can speak to that request. Currently, our EMTs and paramedics have an opportunity to participate in the Wyoming Retirement Program. And their retirement is a little bit different than regular town employees. They're similar to how the fire district operates their retirement. This is set by statute. It's a nominal contribution of $18.75 per person per month. And I am recommending that the town pay for that full portion as opposed to dividing it by the $9.38 per each. To me, it's a fairly cost-effective recruiting and retention technique, and I think that our budget variance would be, for the remainder of this fiscal year, our budget variance would be $600 and some change. Future budget variance would be under $1,000 per year total for all the EMTs that we currently have on staff.
So Kim had brought it to my attention, but currently we don't have great acceptance rate. But for those that do, they occasionally might not go on a call for a month. So it's hard to take their portion from zero to deduct it from their pay. I've been on the fire board. We pay the fire board pays 100% of their retirement, and I guess I could go into all the nuanced details, but in my mind, I'm very supportive of doing this for the overall cost. I would agree that it's a benefit we can give to people who are not terribly well compensated for their efforts. So,
I would move that we cover the expenses of the retirement for EMS.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded to pay, cover both halves of the Wyoming retirement for EMS. Any discussion? The only thing I would add to this is that this is some diligence on your part. So I know that the fire has a mechanism for minimum participation, showing up to meetings, whatever. I mean, I guess it's on you to tell us that they're active.
No problem. There's only 8 of us, so it's
Easy to
fairly
tell.
easy to
Well,
manage.
we hope there's 26 of you eventually, is what we hope, but it's probably not gonna happen. So, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 is review and approve recommended ambulance service rates.
So our ambulance service rates have not been updated for more than 6 years, to my knowledge. The last update, I believe, was in 2018. We discussed an increase in 2021, and it was approved, however, it never went into effect. So with the exception of mileage, I am just basically recommending that we reintroduce what was proposed in 2021 with an increase on the mileage from $15 to $18. This afternoon, we received the information on what AMR currently charges for their runs. When I initially sent this out, I had sent you the comparison of different regions and throughout the United States. However, I thought, well, AMR has the contract for Laramie County, so that would probably be the best one to compare it to. And as you can see, even with our proposed rate increases, that we are still significantly less than what AMR would be charging. With the increase of our EMT skill levels, pretty much all of them will be at least advanced, if not, well, we have one intermediate and paramedic. That will just, we're improving our services, and, we are often operating at a loss. And so I think it's time to look at this new proposed rate increase for services. Pat and I are also really kind of digging in a little bit more to, we were able to gain access to the per call charges and payment rates, and our initial view of that was a little bit alarming. The total aging for the last 3 years, we are close to $150,000 that have not been paid. These are a combination of private insured, like Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, things like that, Medicaid, Medicare, other like TRICARE and VA, and a certain percentage of that is also from uninsured.
So does our billing company, are they aggressive at trying to get that or not?
This is, the first we are learning of all of this, because, again, we just gained access to that. So we are really starting to dig in, just to let you know that, we've kind of pulled up the list and gone through. I think that we have we have a lot of calls that we respond to that are not folks within the Pine Bluffs limit, that are from, the county, or people that are passing through from, Highway 80, Highway 30, accidents, things of that nature. Excuse me. And, there's a large number of those unpaid bills that are, not from our Pine Bluffs community. Not that that makes a lot of difference, but considering that AMR has the contract to take care of patients for all of Laramie County, but we feel it's our duty to respond to people that we can get to quicker than AMR can respond to from Cheyenne, that, it's, our guys are in the business of saving lives. It's important for them to get out there, but there needs to be a way that we can, tap
Well,
into
it sounds like
the
two,
person.
I mean, I agree, we could
Yes.
dive into that, but it sounds like two separate issues, and I appreciate
Yes.
that you're getting on that, but the billing, regardless of who it is, needs to be fixed to
Yes.
whatever extent we can. I mean, we're always gonna have some bad debt.
Oh,
in this
absolutely,
business, but,
absolutely. And so we will look into that, and maybe it's as simple as, we just need to share with them who our account is with our collection agency and go that route. We do allow people to be on payment plans, and we have several that are. And so we just need to work closer with our billing service, and we will be doing that in the coming weeks.
So, on a different note, Dennis and I had talked about this, and maybe Pat can speak to this. My only concern on the new rates, and it's, so I wanna know if we're paying people to do it at all hours of the day, and then we're obviously, there's some cost involved besides just labor. What is your feeling about the, I guess on here it's the assess and release category, and whether there should be a nominal fee for that? Pat?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think that we could incorporate a fee for that, because, example, a diabetic patient, we come to their house, we have to start an IV, give medications and oxygen, and could be there an hour, maybe 2 hours on some folks. And they start to come around, they don't want to be transported, and they have that right, as long as they're alert-oriented and of age. And no alcohol or other substances on board that we identified. I think there should be a fee for that. AMR charges
What
some
do
higher
they,
fees for things like that, but
do they
'cause our
call
guys are
it?
gonna get paid either way.
They don't have it, or it's not on our list, I
It's
don't
not
think,
listed on
unless
this
there's
list,
some,
but
but
they
they
have
do
that.
charge for that, AMR?
If they do ALS treatment, they do. And I know that from when I worked at AMR.
So what percentage of the,
Last month on that last note I sent you, I think there was one treatment release was all.
and was it, but I mean, would it have qualified as a pay or not pay?
I think you can
What?
bill whatever you want into it'd be the same as going to the clinic and getting
But
a
we
shot.
don't.
But you see what I'm saying,
Yeah.
if you're spending an hour or two and I mean, obviously, we're buying the IV to,
And you're administering oxygen, and none of that's, getting the bottles refilled isn't free,
We have
that's,
to come back, restock all those
That's right.
supplies, recheck.
and we're just talking about the time you're on scene, let alone all of
let
the
alone all the
administrative
paperwork
things
that
you
you have to
have
fill
to
out
do
when
to
you
do
get
that.
Correct, yep. And that's something we can look into
Well,
adding to this proposal.
I don't know what the right number is, I mean, even a couple $100 at least starts to cover some of our efforts. I'm okay with any rate, I would just recommend that we find some rate that is appropriate in there.
Yeah.
to-
AMR has that, if you have their list, they have that waiting time.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go off that, 143, start there, or just use that as a base for their kind of wait time when they do wait on scene significant times. That usually for transports when they're waiting at radiology or wherever, that's where that time frame, or that waiting time fee comes from, but we could use that as a base to start for a treat and release, or, so we don't wanna start billing by item either, that would get.
No.
It's too messy.
Yeah,
think
we're not set up for
that
that right now.
sounds like a lot
Basically,
for
what's
you.
happening is if one of our guys shows up and they need oxygen and they give them an IV and they basically get to feeling better and they say, no, I'm doing better now, that's basically like a doctor doing a house call. And it seems to me that that needs to be billed as something reasonable, like,
And significantly in the past, since, especially in volunteer EMS, it has not been, just because they just assume that that kind of falls in with the fire department. There's no charge for those types of things until the wheels turn on the ambulance. We would strive to change that mode of thinking, because it does have significant impact, or can
So-
over a year, you know.
oh yeah.
So if you have, and I don't know any of this, so I'm just gonna use a hypothetical. If you have frequent flyers that maybe that you respond to a few times a year for various things, what is their reaction to this going to be?
Those folks are in a different demographic where,
Can they pay anyway?
no. Is the down and dirty answer. They
Can it be
probably
billed
wouldn't
to
pay, or
Medicaid,
we would
Medicaid?
bill and bill and bill, and I assume that they could not pay or would not want to pay.
Could it be billed to Medicare or Medicaid or one of the other? Do they pay them?
Those don't pay out as much, right?
Well, I know they don't, they're at a discounted rate, but something's better than nothing. Is it worth the billing though?
Well, our EMS billing service charges us a percentage of our revenues.
Of the collected or the billed?
I believe it's collected.
Good.
Basically, it's 15% of the money that they send to us for, or
Or you
that
think
we're
that'd be
successfully
more
collected.
incentive to clean up that?
Yeah, you'd think that there would be.
It's a small amount. I mean, we train all the folks that the best option is to get transported, to be evaluated by a physician. It's more paperwork and more liability on us to do treat and releases or to do refusals or lift assists. That's huge liability because we're not physicians. So the ideal situation is to transport everybody that calls 911. But some people, you know, this gentleman calls 911 for me, but I don't want to go. That's those situations are usually in that same ballpark where someone else called for you, and then the patient can't refuse, and then we get stuck in that.
I guess I would still rather have something on the books and be in a position to forgive than
Right.
to be upset because we spent 3 hours on scene and did nothing. And not that it really matters in terms of arriving at the dollar figure, but when we did redo more structured rates for EMTs, we added that to their list of things they got paid for, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And one thing that I failed to put as a recommended amount was a standby per hour amount, because, 90% of our standby we do for the school or trail days or something like that, and we don't want to, charge for that. However, there are sometimes private entities that come to town that hold a rodeo event here, and we do bill them for standby. And in the past, it's been at the EMT director's discretion. However, I think that we should have something set in our pricing structure to cover those standbys for, like I said, private businesses that are coming in.
Yeah.
So like this AMR waiting time, or their standby says per hour, their waiting time is also on a per hour basis?
It didn't
Probably.
specify on the list that we received. Pat, do you
Standby
know?
per hour is $140.
Right, but their waiting time, is that amount per hour or?
It doesn't say per hour, it just says wait time,
Sure.
which, when I worked there, that was if it took too long or the patient wasn't ready to leave the hospital. And you can't take an ambulance out of service in a larger city and just have them sitting and waiting. There's other calls coming in they need to go respond to. So then we would cancel, and that, the hospital would get billed for us standing around even though we weren't transported. Different scenario than here.
Any other thoughts?
Those original rates were figured for, what did you say, 2021?
Correct.
We've seen a lot of inflation since 2021. Are those still adequate, or do we need to revisit those and tweak them up 3 to 5% or something?
Sure. You know, I think that initially those would be adequate and with the increase in the mileage rate from the originally proposed
Those went from 15 to 18.
15 to 18. And then my suggestion would be to reevaluate after another year to ensure that we're on the mark for that. Again, this is the first time we're really digging into how EMS is handling overdue billings and things of that nature. So,
Well, my feeling is looking at the AMR rates,
Yeah.
they arrive at these crazy rates based on knowing the maximum either insurance companies
sure.
or the government will pay for any of these things, because otherwise you don't set a rate at 1778.56. Like, it's odd.
Yeah.
Like, seems really odd to me. So
They are buying that contract though, correct?
Correct.
From the county.
Yes,
Yes.
they pay for that contract.
Do you know what the shortfall is for AMS services now? And I mean, I guess you kind of said that. Do you think the proposed rate, does that cover that shortfall or just get us closer to covering it? Do we have a way to back into that number?
We do not at this time.
Okay.
I think it will, again, I think that now that we have full access to some of that information, I think that by going to this 2021 rate, which if you look at that rate study document I set, we basically picked the average of public providers. I believe it was the nationwide average, and or was it the Western region? The Western region, I'm
yeah.
sorry. And so we went with that average, and then that was a good starting point for us so that we can, you know, see where that brings us over the course of the next year. And then hopefully have a more thorough analysis for you and maybe have that in line with our budget process in the springtime.
That's a good plan of attack. I support this increase of rates, with the addition of a standby fee, and an assess and release. So I don't know if we need to
why don't we just
throw that
pick,
on.
they have a number, we seem to be below theirs on
Yeah.
everything. So theirs are roughly 140, about
Yep.
125
Yep,
something.
Sounds good to me.
I think that's great for both.
Do we need to charge for other services like oxygen or?
I think that would be in the like
I was saying,
assess
get too messy
release.
doing itemized.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just did a,
If someone needs that many items, we'll be turning wheels to the hospital.
Okay.
So I guess
Great.
I
Well,
would hear a motion to something to that effect.
I move to approve the proposed rate changes for the EMS billing with the addition of a standby and assess and release fee of $125.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the rates with the aforementioned additions. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next, visitor comments. Hearing none, department reports, Jana,
I have nothing.
Dave,
Nothing at this point, airport meeting tomorrow.
Ally?
I'm going to turn my department report to Pat since he's here, and he has an announcement about some advanced students.
Yeah, so we've had, the whole department went through the advanced EMT class, sans Brenda and myself. And they all passed their practicals at the beginning of December, kind of the hands-on, all the different skill stations. So they're going from EMT to advanced EMT. So everyone gets confused, they think, oh, an EMT and paramedics is the same thing. Not at all. So they went from EMT to advanced EMT, which is kind of the middle level. Brenda Armstrong, who's been on our service for decades, she's an old school intermediate EMT, which Wyoming only had that level for a long time because Wyoming didn't have paramedics. So we have myself, one paramedic, an intermediate EMT, and the rest of the department should, if they all pass their written exams, will be advanced EMTs, which is pretty rare for this area to have a whole department of all advanced providers. So it's a pretty big deal for us. But so far, 2 have completed the entire process and are actually licensed, and that's Rebecca Brayton and Mr. Tim Michaud. So congrats to them. I hope when they all get done, closer to the holidays, we can all come in and they can, have a little, you guys can congratulate them, and we'll give them a pin or a patch or something at that time. But appreciate your support in that class, and I know it impacted our budget, but I think it'll be well worth it for our town.
Thanks, Pat.
Great, thank you. Dennis?
Okay, so we met with WyoStar and they did a presentation on their investment strategy. And after having watched and listened to what they had to say, we decided to move half of all of the assets at the landfill into Wyoming class. And we're gonna put identical sums of money in Wyoming class and WyoStar and see where we come out at the end of the year. And whoever's performing better will probably move the rest of the money into that. We have a new Caterpillar on the way that's it was supposed to have shipped the 24th today, I guess. So hopefully that'll happen. We still haven't located a man lift. They're really hard to come by right now. New ones have a 2-year waiting list on them. And the used ones are just difficult to get a hold of at the moment. Other than that, things are going well.
Great. Alex, do you have anything?
Just say that we'll, we have a couple of things in the works, charter ordinance, but that's gonna be for the Monday meeting.
Okay. All right, thank you. Austin?
I guess just to update our string of burglary vehicle thefts, or thefts from vehicles, I should say. We're working with, it's up to about 8, we're working with up to 8 agencies now. Most of them are in the Panhandle, Nebraska and Colorado. The biggest towns are Sidney and Sterling. So we don't have a lot of good video evidence on our end of it yet, but Sidney and Sterling do. A couple of the stolen debit cards we've been able to trace to similar incidences that happened in Sterling and Sidney. So slowly but surely we'll tie that in and hopefully we can bring some kids to justice. They're looked to be younger, probably older than 16, but younger than in the mid-20s. So they're pretty young. And that we believe they're from somewhere down South Colorado area. So, but that's kind of an update on that. Other than that, It's been pretty good this week. I did spend last week in Douglas, Wyoming, so passed all that, so I am now officially official. So I guess that's the only other update I have.
Great, thank you. Jackie?
The only thing I have is Renee and I did our Department of Audit training yesterday. So we are both now complete, so that's 2 more of us, I guess. So I guess you did it as well. So I think that's, yeah.
Great. Kim?
Happy to announce that we are the recipients of a TAP grant in the amount of $194,554 to complete an approximate project cost of $215,000, and that's for our pedestrian ADA upgrades throughout the community. It's first, it's the evaluation and master plan for that, so that then we can go ahead and apply for future TAP grants. Alex, I sent the grant paperwork to you for review and your signature. So if you could sign that and get it back to us soon, that would be great. Our audit for fiscal year 2021 is finally complete by MHP. I've been expressing the need for us to get our 2022 and 2023 audits complete and quickly. Unfortunately, due to manpower shortages, not just with MHP, but with other Wyoming auditors that conduct fund accounting audits, there is no quick resolution to that. We are on their spring calendar, and we will conduct both fiscal year audits simultaneously.
I will believe that when I see it happen.
Yeah, you and me both. They did provide a list of other CPAs that could assist with pre-audit preparation to make sure that things flow as quickly as possible. I don't know that there's a whole lot of pre-audit prep that needs to happen with our finances, but we'll have somebody review it anyway just to make sure that we don't have any hiccups. And our grant package, or our loan package for a DWSRF was finalized last Friday, and that will be for review at the December 7th SLIB meeting. And that is for the $1.875 million for our North project. One last thing, our grader is failing. We've known that, it's getting to that age, so we need to have that evaluated, but in the meantime, it is out of commission. So we're gonna be seeing what the estimated damages, what that total is going to be, and making some recommendations, hopefully by the next meeting.
What do you mean by damages?
Not, and I shouldn't say damages, but I guess damage to our budget. But see what's going on with it. But right now it is completely out of commission.
Yeah, I would think spending more than a few $100s on it is probably not a worthwhile investment, but we also know what graders cost.
How old is this unit?
Looks to be like a 78 model.
Yeah,
I guess, something
it's
like
pretty
that.
old. And so there are, we'll just need to look at what options are out there. Is there possibly a good lease program that we could participate in versus trying to purchase something, or look into some other options for funding.
So while Alex is on about this is a question I had the other day is, Alex, are you still there?
Yes.
So if we wanted to, it's a full bid package for a lease. Would that be correct? Like, we need to release a complete RFP for a lease?
If it exceeds the statutory limit, yes.
Well, I think it's gonna, exceeds it in the value of the equipment or in the total dollars for the lease period?
Total dollars.
So if we leased it by the year, you could, whatever, but you answered my question.
Yeah, you could do it.
I'm not trying to circumvent, like, I don't have one in mind, I'm just wondering what that process looks like, so.
Yeah, I mean, if you capture, time intervals that are likely to be below that amount, it never hurts to do an RFP just to see what people, are willing to do or maybe phone around and stuff, but, that's routinely handled in the ordinary course of business.
Okay. Thank you. Announcements, meetings?
We'll be closed November 10th, Friday, November 10th for Veterans Day.
Correct.
The quarterly, you guys should have received your invites, both via, this time I did send them 2 ways. I tried email, since the county had done theirs that way. They have their master list that had emails, so I thought we're gonna try both. And actually, we've gotten a really quick and good response from the emails, so that's been nice. It will be Wednesday, November 15th at 6 o'clock at Sadie's. And then the regular meeting will be Monday, November 13th at what time?
So I feel now like,
That's why I didn't say.
I do think we should switch, but I'm wondering if the first of the year is the time, cause frankly, we may have something, but I feel like we would like if we went back to the 2 meetings, we're gonna end up canceling the second meeting in December, likely. Maybe not, I have no idea. When would everyone else like to switch over?
First sounds easy just because it's the first, so.
That's fine.
To switch it in January?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works for me.
Officially, first meeting in January will be at
So
6.
the regular meeting will be on Monday, November 13th at 7 p.m. then.
And we figured out 6 o'clock on the second Monday
Yeah.
and the
Fourth
fourth
Wednesday.
Monday, or is it still on Wednesday?
Oh,
2 Mondays like that is
Yeah.
fine to me. It's probably easier.
It's easier that way.
That works.
But at 6, both will be at 6, starting January 1st, second and fourth Monday at 6.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
I just. And did we decide whether we had to put that in, did you talk to Alex about that? or-
so so currently, yes, it has it, and per the DOA training yesterday, we have to state that somewhere, or otherwise we're going to have to advertise.
Yeah,
3
you have a
places. Yes.
you have a lower advertising obligation if you put it in
Yes.
your
Yes,
ordinance.
yes.
So we should just roll it into the charter update.
That sounds good to me.
Did you hear that, Alex?
I did.
Okay.
I'm not sure if, we set the meeting by ordinance or resolution though?
Oh, I think you can do that too.
You can't
right?
do
Can
it
do
either
either
way,
way.
yeah.
But ordinance was better.
It just has to be
But resolution is easier to fix
to
later,
change per,
when somebody
because-
else has a
yeah.
wild
Yeah,
idea.
I could check that and confirm it before the next meeting, so you have time to react to it.
Yeah, we would love to discuss this another time.
One more
We
time,
don't-
just for fun.
All right. Thank you. Anything else, anyone?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, Alex.
Good night, guys.
Night.
6:30 on the dot, you know,